Hello and welcome to the third episode of my podcast, the Misinformation Podcast. I'm Z, aka the Reluctant Accountant, and you know what? We made it! Well, I'm really happy to be here for the third episode. First of all, I didn't know if I'd necessarily make it through to 3. You know, sometimes you do something, you start this idea, and it seems like a good idea at the time, right? You go through and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do a podcast. And then you get like an episode in and you're like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And that's not to say that I can do this. If you've listened to episodes 1 and 2 and you're kind of thoroughly disappointed, well, imagine how disappointed we feel. But no, I'm glad that people are here. I'm glad that you've managed to join me. Again, if this is your first episode, welcome. I will tell you a little bit about what I do on this podcast. But if this is your third and we've got through this together, look at us. Look at us making progress, okay? And they said we couldn't. They said we wouldn't make it, and we're here. So I'm really happy to be here. The Misinformation Podcast is basically about speaking about themes or subject matter that are sometimes held in a discourse that is quite misinformed. So that discourse can be around, you know, conspiracy theories. We all love a good conspiracy theory. Or it could be that it's just there's a lot of misinformation that comes out about these things, or we just don't actually speak about it in a certain way. We don't necessarily look at this subject matter, or if it is spoken about, it's not the kind of prominent way that we speak about something. So I feel like I'm skirting around the issue. I'm going to introduce today's episode, and we're just going to get to it. So today, the title of the episode is called In Sickness There Is Wealth. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are going to be like, I know what this is going to be about. It's going to be about Big Pharma. No, it isn't. I'm not trying to be different. I'm not trying to be different. So the reason I'm not looking at Big Pharma, because I think this is something that is part of kind of law. When it comes to our health and our well-being or whatever, Big Pharma is always the enemy. It's the go-to, right? It's the like known villain that we all go, oh, well, they just want our money. And they do. And there is big wealth in Big Pharma. But I'm going to take it in a different direction. You know, today I want to talk about wellness and this kind of wellness industry. And I feel like people are going to be upset with me, which is not a position I'm unfamiliar with, so it's okay. Welcome to the club. There's probably a Facebook support group you can join. But in the meantime, I want to talk about wellness industry because for a long time, I have felt that there is this weird's probably not the right word, and I'm aware that I'm probably going to offend people in this journey because this is the new wave, you know, the new wave of, you know, wellness and self-care and all of this. But there's a real reason that I'm looking at this, and I've tried for a while to put my finger on it, like why this doesn't always sit well with me. Look at that. Well, I'm saying well a lot. Why this hasn't always kind of, I don't know, like how they say in Jamaica, you know, my spirit na take it. And the reason that I wanted to look at the wellness industry is because I think that for the most part, they've been able to capitalize off the fear of people, or the fear that people have, of Big Pharma, and also this just fear that we have of like dying, right? Of getting old or whatever and dying. So I have always kind of felt like there's this intersection, and stay with me, between wellness and cult behavior and cultish vibes. And I couldn't always put my finger on it. So I want to talk about this wellness / cult crossover, but I feel like I need to explain my fascination, not even with wellness, but with cults in general. So I was almost recruited into a cult. And you know what? Let me just preface this by saying I'm always a bit dramatic. I wasn't almost recruited, but I feel like I was almost recruited into a cult. So I'm going to tell you the story, and you can tell me whether this was cultish or not. And if this was, I'm going to say this was maybe about 10 years ago this happened, okay? And I was in my spirituality era. Like, and you know what? I'm not a keen adherent to these things. So I'm not a purist when it comes to these things. So when I say I was in my spirituality era, I want you to kind of take that with a pinch of salt. I wasn't quite like in the crystals and everything, but I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm a spiritual being. there must be a better way to live my life. And I feel like that's how they get you, right? That's how all cult and wellness cults and whatever it is, it's always about people wanting to make improvements, which I feel makes the practices that I'm going to speak about a little bit later even more nefarious. So anyway, I was going to be like this wellness spirituality babe. I was like doing my meditation. I was trying to like not eat things that have too many E numbers in them and all of that kind of stuff. I was doing all of that. And at the time I was like contracting. So I'd like move from one company to another quite frequently. So within a year, it could be like 4 or 5 different places I stayed at for a couple of months each time. So I was at this one place and I kind of connected with this girl that was there. She was not the cult leader, by the way. I kind of connected with this girl and I was like, she was kind of on the vibe, right? We were both like vibing and we're like, yeah, we're going to be like eating natural foods and organic and all of this kind of stuff and this vibe. And I was like, yeah, I'm like trying to get into my meditation and whatever. So she mentions to me, and I'm going to try and make it vague on purpose because I'm not sure if I can get sued for this. And I just also want to make it clear that the place that I went to, they may be a cult, but I don't know that it was them that were necessarily like kind of the architects of this cult. So what happened was she was like mentioning, she was like, oh, my sister's really into like this kind of spirituality like thing where you kind of, doing that shadow work as they call it. And she went to this place and it was really great. So I'm not going to say the name of the place, but I'm going to tell you where it was. So I was like, oh my God, this is great. And also at this time, I just need to kind of fill in on this story. Also at this time, I had met a friend who was a crystal lady. She was a crystal lady. Not like deep into it again, but she'd talked to me about crystals. And I'm gonna be honest. Like, as I said, I wasn't a purist. So I was just kind of like giving a yes's piece a lot of the time, but I didn't really know what she was talking about. So anyway, so I told her about this place and I was like, oh, there's this place in Oxford. Someone at work told me about, maybe we should go. Like, I don't think you have to pay. And like, it sounds like a really good vibe and whatever. So we go to Oxford together to this place and it's beautiful. It's like this beautiful house and they have like a number of like sessions and things that they're doing during the day and they give you like free food and, they take you around this beautiful house and it was great. It was great. So I was like, this is so cute. This is so cute. I'm also like a little bit in my own world at certain times. So I feel like I'm a bad person to try and recruit into a cult because I'm not always paying attention to like your intentions, if that makes any sense. So as they're doing this kind of homely tour and they're, talking about the people that kind of stay there and stuff like this, at that moment, I was not picking up a vibe of like, yeah, and you could stay here. Like, that wasn't the thing. I was just like, oh, this is cute. Look, lucky for them. Da-da-da. That's all I was thinking. So anyway, I'll get to the point. So we get to this part of the session where they've been bigging up this guy that's going to come and speak. And I'm like, okay, this guy sounds great. They do the intros that you have and it's like this guy comes out and the people, you're waiting for this. And I can't remember what his name is, so I couldn't even out him if I wanted to. But they were like bigging this guy up. And I was like, this is like, he sounds amazing, right? And so this guy comes out and like good looking guy, like a white guy and he's maybe like early 30s or something like that. Nice hair. He had that like nice little short, but like almost floppy. Like it was like a bit of a golden retriever vibe, right? That he was, and he gets up to the stage and he's like smiling and he's like oozing charisma and everything. I was like, this is going to be good. Like he looks like he's a good speaker. So there's about 50 of us in the room and he starts speaking and he's speaking about stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And there's times when he's saying things and I'm like, what the, am I? And there's that point when you hear something and you're like, no, I must have misheard what he's saying. And to paraphrase, and again, I don't know I can't recite the exact thing he was saying verbatim, but it was something about, like everything is your destiny. So whatever happens to you, that's the path that you were meant to be on. And so if in your life you are, ill, that's because of the things that you've attracted into your life. Basically, if bad things happen to you, that's because of you. It wasn't because of anyone else. And I was sitting there like, huh? And at one point, I don't know if the person that stood up asked the question, I can't remember, or the man brought it up spontaneously. But this man stands up and obviously this man is in the same mindset as me. Mind you, there are like 50 other people that are not in the same mindset as either of us, clearly, because they're kind of nodding like this. And he stands up and he challenges this guy. He challenges him and he says, what do you mean? He said, it's all very good for you to have this kind of moral relativism, but I work with very vulnerable people. And actually what you're saying is very dangerous. You're saying that the misfortune that arrives at their doorstep is their fault and whatever. So he's making this claim and, there's a discussion about, if someone is attacked in the street, what are you saying that that's their fault? And instead of standing around and saying, oh no, oh my God, sorry, is that how it came across? That's not what I'm saying. This man just kind of laughs and he's kind of laughing and like moving his nice good hair around. And he then looks at the guy that has commented this. He looks at this guy that's kind of made this comment and he's laughing at him and he's almost like saying stuff as like, you know what, this guy just doesn't get it. Like he just doesn't get it. Hasn't arrived. He doesn't see the light the way that we do. And he obviously is quite happy to let other external forces dictate the things that happen in his life. And I'm like, are you not okay? I'm sitting to myself thinking, what is happening? But people are laughing along with this guy, Mr. Floppy good hair. And so the man is furious. He kind of sits down and the floppy hair guy finishes his speech and he's smiling and he's like, doing all this like, oh my God, I'm so young and cute and whatever he's doing. And at the end of that session, he's obviously, because they're always selling, right? So this stuff was free, but he starts talking about, and I feel like he had a book. That he was maybe selling, but there was definitely more to it. It was like, if you want to hear me speak again about how your life is shit and it's all your fault, I have another course. And I shit you not, I am not kidding. When he finished speaking, first of all, there was like this really big applause. People go up to him, like the whole room. And I look around because I'm sitting in my chair like, what the fuck is this? And the guy that stood up is sitting down. And there's like 3 other people that are sitting down. We're all just like looking around like, what the hell just happened here? Like what was going on? And we kind of came together. And there were like, the way that people had gone up to this man, it was like, he was like the celebrity, like it was like boy band era. They were all wanting to like talk to him and whatever. And I said, wow. But that was the time that I was almost inducted into a cult. That's why I wanted to kind of talk about this kind of wellness / cultness. Yeah, that'll do. So this wellness / cult vibe and also just the money that's involved in it. Because I think that when we speak about these things, we speak about them as distinct entities. So you've got this kind of, there's the wellness industry, then you'll speak about cults kind of separately. And then also like just the grift and the scams. Again, that's separate. And sometimes there's crossover. We'll have a good, Netflix documentary or whatever, and we'll consider the crossover. But we don't always see them as very much like that Venn diagram being almost circular. And I'm not saying that sounds awful, but I'm not necessarily saying that all kind of wellness practices obviously are not, scams or they're parts of cults. But we live under a system of capitalism. And so in much the same way that you can have Big Pharma taking advantage of, the little guy and people and the way that we're living our lifestyles now and the things that we're susceptible to, it would be ridiculous to assume that everybody is a good actor, a good faith actor. Everybody that starts this wellness thing and everybody that kind of goes on this journey and tries to sell you these products are doing so because they genuinely just want the world to be a better place. And I would argue, and I'll come back to this, but I would argue that actually the wellness lot are actually more dangerous than the Big Pharma in some ways. So let me get back to that. But let's get started. So the inspiration for this episode actually came, apart from, my own failed recruitment into a cult, the inspiration for this episode actually came because I've been on this journey ever since, I was also almost recruited. I've been on this journey and I've become fascinated with cults and this whole kind of like mind control, the way that people can willingly kind of leave everything that to be truthful and factual behind and just suspend belief and put all of their faith in these kind of demigod figures, right? Or these objects or figureheads. And so, I've done looked at things like the Jonestown stuff and, the Moonies and also just even on a different scale when you look at the Tinder swindler and Anna Delvey and how how these people are able to achieve these aims. And everyone sits there and goes, it can never be me. But I feel like from my research and the things that I've looked at, it could be anybody. So the inspiration for this episode has come from 3 different podcasts. And it was kind of when I was listening to these podcasts, I was like, okay, cool. I have to do something. I have to talk about this kind of intersectionality when it comes to wellness, cults and scams. So the first podcast, and I'm going to shout them all out. The first one was Dangerous Memories. And Dangerous Memories it's kind of about this woman. It centers on this woman who's called Anne, and she styles herself as a therapist. And she kind of seems to target these kind of privileged English girls who have opted to get therapy for whatever reason they are. And when I say privileged, I mean privileged. Like these girls maybe grew up in Monaco or they went to boarding school or whatever. And she slowly just destroys their lives. Like she slowly destroys their life. And you know, some of you are probably, well, they're privileged, so, you know, my sympathy is kept. But when you listen to the podcast, and it is a great one to listen to, when you listen to it, you're almost in this like, what the hell has happened here? So that was the first one. And I don't really speak a lot. I'm not really going to speak a lot or dwell on that one, but I just thought that was a good one to highlight. The second one was called Dr. Miracle, and it's about Dr. Robert Young. And I use the term doctor very, very loosely because he became a doctor in something like 18 months. So from high school to doctor in 18 months from a correspondence college, which is now defunct. So there, take from that what you will. We'll come back to him. But if you're thinking, Robert Young, I remember this guy. That sounds familiar. Yes, it probably does. He is the founder of the Alkaline diet. Yeah? So if anyone's like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever, this Alkaline diet, it was put together by somebody that got their degree or their PhD, and I say that in inverted commas, from a correspondence college in 18 months. So there you go. And the final podcast that I want to shout out as inspiration was the Dream podcast. This one was really interesting, and it's seasons long. There's like 3 seasons or something, and it talks about, and again, this may upset some people, so it's roller coaster ride, and it starts out almost talking about MLM schemes. Well, not almost, it does. It talks about MLM schemes, multi-level marketing or network marketing, as they like to call it. It goes through and talks about the scam of MLM schemes. I know people are going to get upset, but just stay with me. And also not only the scam, but this kind of pyramid schemes that we obviously can associate with these MLM schemes, but also this kind of girl boss era and the cultish way in which many of them seem to be kind of manipulating the people that are members of the scheme, if you like. So those are the podcasts that I am shouting out as inspiration, if you like, for this episode. Okay, so firstly, before I get really, really deep into it, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but I think it's good to set a baseline and say like what a cult is. Like, what do we think of when we hear the word cult? So a dictionary definition is a particular form or system of religious worship, veneration, or devotion directed towards a particular figure or object, which I always think is really funny because that positioning of the religiousness, if that's a word, within that definition, I think is a misnomer. I think it's quite misleading because then if you have other organizations that don't necessarily worship some sort of religious deity, they tend to go, oh, well, we can't be a cult. And so I went further and I came across a checklist, which I think is fabulous. There's a checklist that you can check to see whether your organization or group has the characteristics of a cult. So I'm going to run through a few of them, not too many. There are things like the group is focused on a living leader to whom the members seem to display this excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. The group is preoccupied with making money. Dissent is actively discouraged. You can't question the leaders or the group's intentions, and if you do, you could be punished. The group has this kind of polarized us versus them mentality, which can cause conflict with the wider society. The group's leaders are not accountable to any authorities, and the group leadership induces feelings of guilt in the members, so that's a way to control them. Keep this in mind when I talk about MLMs. My relationship with MLMs is quite interesting, and again, when I was listening to The Dream, it was really interesting because she was going through, the person that presents the podcast was talking about all of these network marketing, especially when it comes to the wellness industry, these network marketing companies And one of them that she mentioned was Avon. And I was like, oh, I did Avon. I definitely didn't think I was in a cult though, or that it was a scam. The reason that I kind of reflected on this, because I was like, was I in a scam? Was I in a scam? Was I in a cult? So I think it was also about my intentions when I went into doing this. So I went in to do Avon for just a couple of months. I always intended to do it for a couple of months. And I also I was like, I'm not holding any parties. It never even crossed my mind to do that, to be honest with you. And I didn't ever try to sell to friends and family. And you must be like, who the hell did you sell to? Well, and this may be my good fortune. At the time, there used to be these other magazines that used to be where I was living. They would post this magazine through your door. It wasn't Avon, but it was something where they sell like windscreen wipers, but also slippers. It was a magazine that just sold everything. And the person would post it through the door on a certain day, and they'd be like, I'm going to pick this up on this day. But there'd also be an order form in there. And so on that day, they picked it up and you gave back the magazine, or you gave back the magazine and the order form. And then they would bring your order to you and then you would pay for it. So I just was like, oh, I'll just do that for Avon, which I did for a few months. And to be honest, I made money. That I didn't sell it to anyone I knew. I just went around the neighborhood, posting them through doors and going collecting them and making these orders. Now, it wasn't a lot of money, but I never thought that was going to be my career anyway. So I think because I didn't enter this kind of, well, scheme is probably a bad word, but because I never entered it with the intention of, being this big Avon sales lady, I never got sucked into any of that. I never recruited anyone. I had no intention of doing that. I just wanted to sell a few products in the meantime, in between time. That was what my vibe was. But that isn't the case for many people. There are a large number of people, and if you're on Facebook, if you're still on Facebook, you can probably see them. They are there trying to peddle everything from like leggings to weight loss products, and they're making these claims that they've just made this, like, I've made a ton of money. I just sit at home and I just recommend stuff from my couch. This is great. I've got so much time. And that isn't always the truth. Indeed, like a lot of the time, it's not true at all. The truth is that a lot of these MLMs are just pyramid schemes that are like disguising themselves as genuine companies. They make these extraordinary claims of like your earning potential, but very few people, if any, realistically make that type of money. One of the key ways that they actually make money is not by selling the products, okay? Because that wouldn't make sense. And also, like, the saturation of the market is a real thing. It's not by selling the products. They make the money by recruiting other members who pay a fee to be part of this group, this company. And what happens to that? A percentage of that fee goes to the person that brought them in. And the higher up the chain you are, the more of that fee you get. And one of the things about MLMs is that people don't really talk about. And again, I know there may be people that have been involved in this, and I do think that depending on your intention, it can be slightly different. But one of the things that people don't talk about is that actually the companies don't really give a about you. And I say that in the full knowledge that normal companies don't necessarily give a about you. I'm not trying to, act as though there are some companies that are like out, most companies are out there, really, really caring for their employees. However, normal companies are bound by like employment regulation and certain things. So there's certain things that they're kind of compelled to be able to provide for people. And so in these MLM companies, they call themselves companies, but they do things like, oh, are you not selling? Then it's not the fact that we haven't trained you on how to sell. It's probably a you problem. So you need to spend all of this additional money and you need to come to this convention and we'll teach you how to sell. And you go to these conventions and they're just basically like motivational speeches, right? They're just people, you go here and you hear people's stories. And a lot of people have to use kind of smoke and mirrors and live in this kind of cognitive dissonance, knowing that they're actually not necessarily doing that well, but you have to appear as though you're doing well because everybody has to believe in the dream for it to work, right? For the pyramid to stay and the house of cards not to crumble, we all have to pretend that this is something that makes sense and we're doing well at it. And remember when I spoke about cult-like behavior when it comes to MLMs? Well, remember one of the things, the checklist. They're preoccupied with bringing new members in. That is a key central tenet of MLMs. That is the way that you make money. Get more people to do it. Get more people to do it. But as I had a conversation with someone about this the other day, and they said how someone tried to get them to sign up. And when they looked at it, they were like, the math ain't mathing. This is not going to make any sense because markets become quickly saturated. You can't have everybody doing this. It doesn't make any sense. Also, there's the group being preoccupied with making money. Now, of course, Of course, it's a company. You're going to be like, yes, of course. The motive is to make money. But it isn't just that. You'll think about these MLM schemes, and not only do they have like, oh, you're supposed to sell our products, which we're not even selling to you at a significantly discounted rate. So your markup is not going to be great anyway. They also operate, for the most part, a cartel. So if this was really your business, and this is what they like to say, this is your business. This is your business. If it was really your business, then you should be able to offer significant discounts, and you should be able to do all of these other things. But they don't want to do that. The price more or less is fixed that you can offer these products at. And also the discount that you're getting is not giving the margins that you would need to be able to operate a sustainable business. So actually, if I'm going to buy a product that is kind of mid in the first place, it's not something that's superior, and pay over the odds for it, why don't I just go to a shop, to a regular shop? Why would I go and necessarily buy it from this person? And so back to this kind of preoccupation with making money, they often have targets. So you have to hit certain targets, and then you get to be like a gold seller or a gold this or whatever it is that you have. And so what a lot of the members do is when they feel that they're getting to the end of the month and they're in danger of not hitting their target, what they will do is spend the money themselves and buy the product themselves. So they have a lot of product there that they've bought in order to get this kind of, additional tier within the organization. And a lot of them get into debt. And that's such a shame. And so the final thing is this, I wanted to kind of draw on the parallels, was this induction of guilt, the induction of feelings of guilt in members. One of the things that they do as well is there is this idea that if you are not selling, it's not because the product is crap. It's not because the business model is ridiculous and unsustainable. And it's not because you're essentially in a pyramid scheme. No, they'll say, oh, but it's just because you're not selling. Maybe you haven't done this. Who's on your hit list? Who can we tap up for money? And it's also just this awful position, because a lot of the time, if people get into something, and specifically with network marketing, if they get into it because they're kind of like, oh, I really like the product. I really genuinely like the product. That is one thing. And then you get sucked into this situation where, oh, you like the product, but now your survival is based on this product, and you being able to convey this message to other people. And the second thing is, if there are people that are like seeing this as a genuine way, for example, out of poverty or out of financial difficulties, a lot of the time, and there are so many stories that you can find, you're not going to get out of financial difficulties. In fact, the company model, so not as you as an individual business, so-called business owner, but the company model is such that they need you to be the person that they're making money from. And I don't mean that you're going out and you're doing amazing sales. I mean, they need you because they want you to sell coaching when you get to certain levels. They want you to buy coaching from them. So you're coached by them to become a coach, even though your sales may not be great, even though you probably spent a lot of money or on your own credit card to make up your sales figures. So that's what they do, is that if you're not doing this, if you're not selling, well, this is a great company, these are great products, then the problem's with you, not with the products or not with the business model, which is absolutely false. So as I was saying, apart from the desire for financial freedom and wanting to be business owners, I think that MLMers, that sounds funny, MLMers, I think that people that go into network marketing, they can, especially when it comes to wellness products, they can be people that just believe in the efficacy of the product, right? And they go in with kind of good intentions. But like, what happens when those things are mixed and it becomes kind of dangerous? So reintroducing Dr. Robert Young. And Dr. Robert Young, as I said, is this like, I'm not going to say a fake doctor, but he's kind of a fake doctor. Like, he's not somebody that I would want to do surgery on me in any way. Like, I'm at this point, and after hearing his story, I'm not sure that I would trust him to put a plaster on my knee. But he is it's the typical grift story. He failed at a few things, and people kind of look at that like, oh, that's your story to business success. No, he failed at quite a few things. And then he decided that, he's got this alkaline diet that he's going to sell to the world. And again, because oftentimes traditional medicines and traditional healthcare can fail, people are in vulnerable states and they look for alternatives. They look for ways that they can heal themselves. And so Dr. Robert Young took advantage of this and became very famous for promoting this alkaline diet. And if you don't know what the alkaline diet is, I want you to know that it's still out there. Like, you can still go and look at it. The irony of this is that many of the foods that they say to you need to consume when you're on the alkaline diet are just foods that are good for you, right? So it's not that this food is necessarily going to heal you in a specific way. It's just a food that's good for you anyway. So he hasn't discovered anything new. And that's one thing. So we can set that aside and go, you know what, if you eat kind of more alkaline foods and if these foods are just generally good for you, that's not a bad thing necessarily. Like, it's a bit of a grift, but it's not the worst case scenario. But it does get worse. So that if he just left it there and said, oh, you know what, I can help you lose weight, that would be one thing. But he didn't leave it there. And so Dr. Robert Young went around and he was like, I can cure cancer. And the thing about that is that when you think about people that have cancer, and most people have had somebody in their lives that has been touched by cancer, it's something that's such a moment of desperation. Even just hearing the word for many people can send such a shiver down, like up their spine, that targeting those people and giving them false hope is such a nefarious thing. It's such a cruel thing to do. And that's what he did. And it wasn't that he just did that and was proven wrong. Because of the cult-like way in which his movement was carried out, or in which his movement took place, this kind of pH miracle farm that I think he had, I can't remember if it's called a ranch or something like that. He had people there that their cancer metastasized and got to stage 4 and became like untreatable because he had convinced them, and they believed so much in him that they only really sought the help of traditional medicine, if you like, at the very last minute and while it was too late. And if you look up the story of Dawn Callie is one of those people that was very much on the ranch with him, seeing other cancer patients coming in. She was trying to do all of these things and treat herself and follow this alkaline diet, because she did grow up as she says on the podcast, on the Dr. Miracle podcast, as this kind of self-styled hippie, and it just felt like it really in line with her beliefs and what she'd grown up and known to be true. And sadly, at the end of it, Dawn does pass away. And the doctors said that if she had got help when she was, first diagnosed, and she'd got the help that she needed, this wouldn't have been the outcome. And Dawn wasn't the only one. And you'd think, and I'm going to bring it back and I'm going to wrap it up in a little bow if I can slightly. It's going to be a messy bow because I'm not great with those things. But Dr. Robert Young, you would think that, well, this guy must be in prison. Like, for the things that he's done, he must be in prison because he's made all these claims or whatever. And yes, he has been to prison, but he's not now in prison. As far as I'm aware, he's out. He's still on the conspiracy theory circuit. I think the new grift came after COVID and he's kind of taken another angle. But there are people that interacted with him and interacted, possibly from a sense of desperation and need and hope, and they're no longer with us. And so why I was saying that at times this kind of intersection of wellness, cult behavior, and the scam are far more dangerous than Big Pharma, because there is at least some sort of oversight when it comes to Big Pharma. They can't just put out certain things. There are, the FDA is involved in the US, and I think in Europe we have even stricter protocols, even stricter requirements when it comes to certain things and what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And there is a certain amount of testing and all of these other things that come with Big Pharma that, rightly or wrongly, help to bring some measure of safety to the average consumer. And that doesn't necessarily exist in the same way with the wellness industry. And so people are far more susceptible. And I just think that is something that we need to look at. So all of that to say this, right? I know that people are going to be upset that I've decided to have a look at the wellness industry. That is not to say that I'm not a big fan of like eating well and living a healthy lifestyle. And you know what? If you want to rub some oils on your temple, do that. But I think that for me, when I think about it, when I look at all of these things, apart from, if you want to message me and think that you're in a cult, let me go through the checklist with you and we can decide whether you need to leave or not. But apart from that, I think that if we look at these things as not alternative therapies, alternative medicine, but complementary medicine, I think that's possibly the safest way to proceed. Well, that is it. That's all I've got time for this episode. I feel like this one's been a long one, and I feel like I could have done so much more. So if you're interested in maybe a part 2 of this, where maybe I go deeper, or a part 2 and a part 3, we could serialize this. And I'm quite happy also to look at Big Pharma, because, you know, we can always two sides this. So yeah, let me know. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is themisinformationpodcast@gmail.com. That's themisinformationpodcast@gmail.com. I'm also on social media, as I say. I'm on TikTok. I'm on TikTok until they finally ban me, at The Reluctant Accountant, and I'm also on Instagram at The Reluctant Accountant. So until then, I'll see you on the internet zeitgeist, but until then, I'll see you next week.